I know this can be controversial, but can plants actually communicate with us? And if so, how do they do it? And what can it be that they're telling us? If that ain't enough for contention, it also begs the question, does a medicinal herb ever really say, "Pick me"? If these happen to be topics you have strong thoughts and feelings about, I do hope that you'll take the time to tell me about it in the comments below. Thank you. Now, I think we've all noticed how often communication, even between people, fails. Kids instructed to whisper something into each other's ears find it hilarious how much it's changed by the time it's made its way around a circle. In addition, there's a tendency to say what we think others want to hear, and to hear in their words what is most agreeable and reaffirming to us. While the idea of bad omens has largely faded in these modern times, there's understandably still a tendency to interpret any signs as being assurance and encouragement. If a desired lover tells us they don't feel ready for a hookup, we might imagine that it's just because they've been waiting for someone exactly like us to come along. And there may be something similar at play when we convince ourselves that we always know what the green beings are trying to say. Now, this in no way is to deny or discount that plants communicate. They certainly do talk to one another, using a sequence of chemical signals transmitted through soil and air, as well as from one enjoined root system to the next. It increasingly seems likely that they can also pass along their messages through third-party intermediaries, the innumerable ectomycorrhizal filaments extending outwards in an informed matrix just below the surface of the ground. Where the fungi enjoin with the plants, they form a web called Hardin's net, an intercellular interface that seems to act like nothing less than a penetrative, intensely connective communications network. They appear to accurately relay crucial information about soil conditions, the biotic landscape, and any stress responses such as to active predation, epidemics, and infestations. And no doubt they tell each other so much more. As components and members of an in some ways conscious planetary whole, the plants certainly mean to impart something to we humans as well. It's what an old friend of mine, Jim Nolan, popularized as interspecies communication. Not just chemical, but energetic and even musical exchanges between dissimilar life forms that turn out to share a whole hell of a lot in common. We share with all living beings not only a common urge to survive, not only a community and a habitat, but we also share a single larger body, Earth, Gaia, of which we are all the organs, agents, and extremities of. It's like a natural circuit board of contact points, of humans, other animals, and the ever-amazing plants. From trees to whales, we've only begun to fathom the degree to which the rest of the contiguous, interactive living planet speaks to each other and to us, and the extent to which we're called upon to function as transmitters of the facts and the spirit of our interconnection. That said, we do well to always check ourselves, our analysis and conclusions, revelations and knowings, for self-serving perspectives and unintentional bias, for any comforting omissions or misunderstandings. We tend to be most open to what we've been wanting to hear and believe all along, most susceptible to spin that seems to confirm that we've already are thinking or else are strongly been hoping for. And we're likely to deny, block out, or otherwise fail to hear those things that might discomfort us, that bring us to the light of hard to resolve dissonance, contradiction, or ambivalence. Even wars are rationalized as remedies with unavoidable consequences. We explain human participation in a corrupt political system by telling ourselves it's the best of all possibilities, and that the fractious officials that we help elect are somehow the lesser of two evils. The wholesale cutting down of life-giving forests is acceptable because of a growing population needing ever more housing and thus more building materials. But this kind of reflexive recasting is as much an issue in interspecies intercommunication as it is in spiritual questing. Matters of social justice and inequality, and nearly everything else. But do plants ever actually ask to be pulled from the ground, processed, and consumed? Or is there something else, a larger conversation, a transmission and exchange that happens whenever we not only take, but mindfully and heartfully receive? An action driving lessons as we learn to more effectively give? When it comes to fruits, they're obviously shouting out to be devoured by creatures likely to help spread their seeds and advance their kind, communicating this through vivid colorations as well as their sweet wind-borne scents. But for the most part, we simply cannot survive without ingesting other life forms, and maintaining our vitality in most cases does require their individual demise. This is true whether we're talking about eating meat or vegetables, gathering wild medicinal plants, or growing plants in a garden. As empathetic, nature-loving, self-identified healers of both people and planet, we can't help but seek out a narrative that absolves us of responsibility for any of the harm that our existence or our work and practice might unintentionally cause. One of the most common religious narratives holds that all creation came into existence primarily to provide for anointed human needs. And while we're admonished not to be wanton or wasteful, it's said that everything is there for our taking. Similarly, there are those who adhere to a humanist precept that we're the most highly involved, conscious, and powerful species, and that therefore we've earned the right to manage the world, assigned with making the assessments and deciding what's going to happen. The highly sensitive natural healers who don't buy into either of these perspectives may nonetheless cling to a different stress-relieving belief, a belief that the plants recognize how special we healers really are, that the plants are moved by our good intentions and our caring missions, that they're more than willing to sacrifice themselves to be of assistance to us. It's a foundational presumption that a human's health and pain relief are important enough to be worth the life of a healing plant, but not necessarily the depletion of an entire wild species, right? Let alone its utter extinction. Rather than acting entitled to nature's varied blessings, including the herbs, we can be sure to take into account whether those plants that we purchase were somehow ethically obtained or ethically grown, and how either plentiful or rare they might be. As wildcrafters, we can pay attention to whether they're annuals near the end of their life cycles or perennials with many years ahead of them, whether the most bioactive and efficacious parts are mainly foliage that can be trimmed without any lasting damage to the plant, or perhaps something essential to them such as their root structures. We're likely to get to know the herbs better and treat them with more caution and restraint, more respect and reverence, if we accept that our appropriation and usage are not harmless, and we bring to the table an attitude and a set of protocols that not only preserves, but praises the amazing herbs helping us and others to heal. A step in the right direction is asking herbs for permission to take their lives, instead of just mindlessly pulling them out of the ground or pouring them out of their apothecary jars. Without the necessary deep connection, without the deep consideration. and we should never take their answers or their approval for granted. The composition and chemical actions of plants did not evolve in order to provide for us. They developed in order to provide for their own protection, their own proliferation, their own health. But as a member of a connected and communicative biotic community, its survival and well-being can only be fully seen in relationship to the surrounding plants and animals, the water, the soil. The overall vitality of ecosystems hinges on what its members emit as well as what they take in, what they give to one another in life, as well as what they release back when they eventually fall in compost. And it all hinges as well on what they tell to each other, and then what they manage to teach to us. So if they're not actually asking to be harvested, asking to be utilized, how is it then that we can sometimes feel drawn to a particular plant, even an unfamiliar plant, one that ends up nonetheless proving to be just the medicine for a specific issue that either you or your client are dealing with? We can simply call this magic until the sciences eventually catch up with a verifiable scientific explanation. But we're certainly led to specific fortuitous species, and often dramatically, and at the exact moment that they're most needed. Particular herbs and trees can end up feeling especially kindred to you, or even representative of your character, purpose, or role. It is certainly more than a lucky coincidence that you may come away with powerful revelations, sensing an assignment, a calling, or a contract, believing that you've been afforded a crucial lesson, that you've heard a missive from these beautiful green beings, a missive that was personally intended for you. Clear understanding of what's being expressed doesn't come easy. You can be with a spouse for decades and yet be discovering new things about them still, about their needs and what they have really been trying to tell you all this time. And they probably speak English, whereas the plants use a nonverbal language largely forgotten by our kind. Comprehension requires practiced attention as well as uncommon openness if we're to turn into their complex nonverbal communications, tune in enough to get any of it straight. It begins with us suspending our preconceptions and quieting our internal dialogue. And then just sitting mindfully in their presence with every molecule of our beings attuned to the signals and sensations that mark deep, ongoing communication. Our interpretations won't always be perfect, but our efforts bring us further into mutually beneficial relationship, and our efforts will certainly be noticed. What we then learn will not just be about if and how to make use of these botanical wonders, but also there will be invaluable insights into who we genuinely are as well. Insights into our unfolding reality. They set for us an example of integrity, an example of balance, of resilience and reciprocity, while speaking truth that's older than words. Emanating from them are potent encouragements to maximize our awareness and our response, encouragements to fulfill our purposes and our missions, to engage unapologetically with the cycles of death and life, with spirit and revitalization, joining with all the rest of the natural world in a dance of fully realized existence in the aims and the arts of healing. Venture and savor.